Hello, and welcome to the podcast, The Guru. My name is Howard Falco, and I'm an author on self-empowerment and a mindfulness and mental strength coach to college and professional athletes and those who are looking for next-level performance and results. The Guru is a podcast offering you the deepest and most powerful wisdom on life and how this wisdom works for you from the inside out. That is, it offers how your mindset has a direct impact on your results. Becoming aware of this process is everything. This podcast is no coincidence. It's been presented to you by you and for you because the truth is, the real guru of your life is always you. Let's see what you brought to yourself today.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today, I am really honored and excited to have former Major League Baseball star, friend, and all-around great guy, Rich Aurilia, on the podcast. Let me give you a little bit of a bio on Rich and his pretty amazing career. Drafted in 24th round by the Texas Rangers in 1992 as a shortstop, Rich played his first Major League game in 1995 for the San Francisco Giants, and he ended up being with them for 9 years. 2001 was a career year for Rich with a National League best 206 hits and a career high 37 home runs and 97 RBIs. He batted .324 that year and collected a Silver Slugger Award and made the All-Star game. This is a cool stat. In 14 postseason games in 2002, he batted .296 with 5 home runs and 14 RBIs, which is a National League record for a shortstop. He was also nominated for the very classy Roberto Clemente Award, which goes to the player best demonstrating sportsmanship, community involvement, and contribution to his team. After 9 years with the Giants, he played with the Seattle Mariners, the San Diego Padres, Cincinnati Reds, and then landing back with the Giants to close his career from 2007 to 2009, where he received a standing ovation in his last home game. He was also honored by being put on the coveted Giants Wall of Fame. Rich Aurilia, thank you for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Howard. It's a pleasure to be on here with you, and I look forward to hearing what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we're going to dig into what made Rich Aurilia tick. What was it that really gave you the edge, not only physically, but more importantly, from the mental side, to be able to get to the level that you were at, to be able to sustain that for so long, which is such a coveted understanding, and to be able to perform at a high level. So I really want to dig into the mental side a little bit. And I guess my first question for you is, when did you realize how competitive you were? At what young age, and what do you think sparked that?
I think I realized at an early age. I was always competitive, and I think part of that was where I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and this will probably sound weird to a lot of people, but you know, when you grow up in a city like Brooklyn, you deal with the people on your block. That's how we segregated things, was your block. And we would compete against, I was East 9th Street growing up, and we'd compete against East 8th Street and East 6th Street, in football in the winter or wiffle ball in the summer. But I think for me, the key was I grew up actually with kids on my block that were a lot older than I was. And I always wanted to keep up and play with the older kids because that was pretty much my only choice. And I think that drove me to just kind of be the best that I could be so that I could go with them. And I remember guys like going up to my mom and dad and saying, and this was, I was probably like 12 and they were like 16 or 17, and saying like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Aurilia, can we take Richie to the park with us to play stickball or whatever? Like, we have a license and we're good, and our parents and all that stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
So like, I think that really drove me as a young kid in my competitiveness to keep up with some of the older kids. And I think that was like ingrained in my mind from an early age.
Were your parents supportive of the journey that you were on?
Yeah. Neither one of my parents were athletes. Not to the extent of even high school sports. But they were very supportive. And, when I look back now and the support that they gave me. Sometimes you don't realize it when you're a kid and what they're doing for you.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, my parents supported me 1,000%, whether it was, scrounging up extra money to get me that new glove, or allowing me to go with my, older friends to go play at a park somewhere, or taking me to all my games when I was a kid. They were supportive of me 1,000%. And of course you look at it differently now as an adult than you do as a kid. I don't think you really, appreciate it as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
but now I could look back and totally appreciate it, especially now dealing with my own kids.
Right. And when you were that young, did you have dreams of playing Major League Baseball, or was it just, let me get to the next level, let me get to the next level?
I think it was just having fun. I don't think until I got to high school, after a couple of years playing in high school, that I really kind of said, maybe this is something I want to do. Maybe this is something I'm good enough to do. But back in the day of, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old, it was just kind of hanging out with my buddies and just having fun, and being fortunate enough to have the ability that, was given to me to just play this sport. I mean, I honestly do believe that some people are given the talent athletically, and what you do with it is up to you. I mean, you have the ability, and how you translate that into the performance is basically up to you. And I was fortunate enough to have the ability to, catch a ball, throw a ball, and hit a ball. And, I was very, very happy about that.
But you also had to be able to believe that you could perform at each level and sustain yourself and get to that level and be there. It wasn't just the talent you had. It was the ability to step up to the next level and bring your belief system with you to that level. Because I've seen a lot of guys with great talent where they're at one level and you think they're the best that there's ever been. And all of a sudden they move to the next level. And for some reason, they haven't been able to accept that.
Yeah. And I do have an example of that. I mean, when I was going to high school, I chose to go to a high school that I knew had a good baseball team. I knew was a great, I knew I'd get a great education there. And a lot of my friends were going there. It was an all boys Catholic school in Brooklyn. And, I went in there as a pretty highly touted baseball player. And I remember in the fall, going to the varsity tryouts. I was invited to go to the varsity tryouts. And the coach at the time was a former 30-year sergeant major in the Army, 3 wars, military guy. And I went the first day to this tryout, and I did okay. I didn't do great, but I did okay. I was so intimidated by the guys that were on the team already, who were juniors and seniors. I was intimidated by the coach, where I stopped going. I just didn't go to the next tryout. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to go play JV. And I think that was a great learning experience for me, because the following year I had a great year at JV and I played really well. And that following, fall came up when I was a sophomore, and I got called into the head coach's office of the varsity team. And he asked me, he said, why did you stop coming last year? I said, well, to be honest with you, I was a little afraid. I was a little nervous that I couldn't keep up. And he goes, that was just a formality. You were going to be my starting shortstop as a freshman.
Wow.
And I said, no, I didn't. And he goes, this is the reason I didn't tell you, because I wanted to see what you had in you and what you're made of. And you weren't ready. And now that you're back this year, you're ready. And I'm telling you, you're my shortstop. And, it's funny because I look back at those days in high school and I realize that this gentleman who, he'll go down all time as one of my favorite people in the whole world. It wasn't about baseball. He was teaching us how to be men, respectable men, how to be respectable athletes. And again, it's one of those things that I didn't really get while I was there. But once I left there and I understood what his goal was to just transform us into really good human beings that could help society. I love that guy to death, and I miss him every day. That was a weird story where my fear overtook my ability to do what I wanted to do. And
even
I
though
could
you
actually,
had the talent, talent.
And actually I could say in the long run, that probably worked out for me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it it taught me to not, not be afraid of fear or be afraid of failure. In athletics, no matter what sport you're in, you're going to fail a ton of the time.
Right.
And it's how you deal with it that can get you to that next level.
Right. And also not to be intimidated by anybody else because, and again, you didn't have the experience yet because they were older kids, but that's why you needed that extra year to gain that sort of confidence that you could play at that level. This is in high school, right?
Yeah.
So that you could play at that level. So that extra year gave you that confidence, but it wasn't a talent thing. It wasn't the possibility of what you could do. It was just having your mind right to be able to do it. And what a great mentor to be able to help you with that.
Yeah. And, I was going into a new experience in a new place. And I guess in the back of my mind, I didn't want to fail at the highest level at that place. I'd rather get to the other level, have a little success, and then move forward. I mean, I could probably say that if I knew I was going to be on that team as a freshman, on varsity, that I probably, would have relaxed a little bit, but I don't know how I would have performed. I probably would have put a bunch of pressure on myself because I was young. I was, ignorant with certain things. And I probably wouldn't have performed up to the level that I wanted to. Because I was always, even into my major league career, I was always very hard on myself. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that it worked out in high school the way it did because of the success I had, but also because of the relationship I built moving forward with my coach there.
That is really, really interesting. You mentioned being hard on yourself, and that is definitely something that a lot of the athletes that I work with, both young and professional, there's a double-edged sword there, right? You want to be hard on yourself because you're chasing perfection. You know what it takes to get to that level. You know what you demand of yourself. But there's also the backside of that can really hurt you because you're putting too much pressure. You almost have to find that perfect space, which I'm sure you had to learn over the course of your career.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard go-between because now, I have my own kids that are athletes and to deal with them. And, it's funny. Some of the times, I'll have conversations with my boys and they'll be like, well, we know that time that you threw your helmet or something like that. And my response to that, a lot of the times, I'm like, well, it's not about me. My career is over. I learned from my mistakes and I learned from things that I did wrong and tried to correct them and do it the right way. I said, and that's the knowledge now that I can give to you.
Yeah.
And I hope you understand that. So me being hard on myself was, and I think every athlete deals with that differently. I actually think it drove me. I've seen a lot of athletes that it just crushes them. So I think it's all about your mental approach to how you're dealing with it, as opposed to just seeing the flare up or the snap, how we would call it in baseball. Oh, this guy's going to snap, and baseball is such a different sport than any other because it's every day. It is an everyday sport where during a 7-month period, there's a baseball game on every day on TV, and you're playing 162 games over 180 days. And the great thing about it was that sometimes, even when I wasn't performing offensively, that I played a position and I could affect the game defensively. So my thought process in the whole thing was, if I'm not going to get a hit, then nobody else is going to get a hit. So anything hit near me, it was my job to gobble up and throw the guy out at first. Or if there was a relay home, my job was to get the relay, get rid of it quick, and throw the guy out the plate.
So let's talk about that, because that's a really, really important point, which I think a lot of, especially baseball players that are so focused on hitting, forget about, which is they're also in the field, and you used your defense as a way to fulfill who you were as a player when the offense wasn't clicking the way you wanted it to. And actually, that probably helped when you made a great play, give you some momentum coming back into the dugout to get back in the box and execute, is my guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you watch a game on TV, and you always hear like the announcers say, like, a guy makes a great play to end the inning before, and they're like, oh, look who's leading off the inning, the guy who made the great play the inning before. I mean, that's your job as, in most sports. There's an offensive side and there's a defensive side on most team sports. And baseball is probably one of the few sports where it's not like football in a sense where you need 11 men to have a successful offensive play, because everybody has their role to block, to, shift to this side, to whatever. Baseball is a team sport, but the essence of it is everything is an individual action. So only I can control what I did on defense, where I positioned myself, how I read the ball off the bat. You play as a team of 9 people on the field at the same time, but your individual actions always dictated how it was going to turn out.
Yeah, or how you're
so if I wasn't supporting, if I wasn't performing well offensively, my thought process was, okay, if I'm going to make an out here, at least I want it to be productive. So let me get this guy from second base to third base. It won't show up in the stats, but it'll be a positive thing for me. And let me go on defense next inning and, turn a double play that probably shouldn't be turned because I was in the right place at the right time. And, we had this term, and I actually explained it to my boys the other day. Like, we were out golfing, and, I said, I'm in salvage mode right now. And they're like, what do you mean salvage mode? And I'm like, I'm in salvage mode. Like, this is like when I'm 0 for 4 going into the top of the ninth and I have an at-bat coming. Do I want to be 0 for 5? Or do I want to be 1 for 5 with a hit, or 0 for 4 with a walk? There's that one something. So in my golf game, I'm like, okay, I got a couple holes left. I'm in salvage mode. Let me get a couple pars and a birdie or something like that. And that's the mentality I have in not only in sports, but in life. There's certain times where you go into salvage mode, where it's like, I'm going to make something good out of, I'm going to make lemonade out of lemons, basically.
Yeah. And I think that is such a great attitude, to be a grinder like that. No matter what, you're going to find some positive, because you don't know when the whole thing can shift.
Hey, while you're listening, I just wanted to remind you that both of my books on self-awareness and self-empowerment are available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all independent bookstores. My first book is titled I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are. And the second one is Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life. Both are powerful, deep dives into how to harness your greatest power for self-understanding and for overcoming any issue in your life. The books also reveal how to be a conscious creator of your life and how to achieve next level results. Along with the actual book, the book is available on Audible in my voice and on Kindle and iBooks. Also, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you can be updated when new episodes are released. Thanks, and now back to the podcast.
You said there's 2 sides to the game in baseball. There's offense and there's defense. And sometimes you use your defense to pick your offense up, and sometimes your offense, made you, pick up your defense in a lot of ways. And I think the analogy to life is sometimes business is going well and sometimes it isn't. And when business is not going well, you can rely on something positive in your family life. And when things are tough in your family life, maybe your focus, you can get your motivation going in your business life. But the key is, I think the takeaway is to always be looking at something you can do to salvage whatever's going on, because you never know when it's going to turn. And I assume that was generated by a mindset of yours that was constantly looking for the positive, or something that you could turn a negative into a positive. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that would be fair. And, listen, I was a guy, you said it earlier, I wasn't a high round draft pick. I was a guy that wasn't supposed to make it. And the one thing that drove me my whole career was when I got drafted. A couple days before the draft, I went to a tryout with the Texas Rangers, who drafted me in the 24th round in 1992. And it was for their head scout, their head national scout. And there was only like 3 people at this tryout. And I remember he came up to me after he's like, they watched me take like 3 ground balls and were like, okay, that's good. We know you could play defense. Let's hit now. So they made me hit with a wood bat coming out of college. And I had played a summer league where I hit with a wood bat a couple years earlier. And it's way different. It really is way different. And I hit for like 10 minutes and they called me to the side, and the scout said basically to me, he goes, listen, you're a decent offensive player, but there's no way your swing's ever going to work playing professional ball. You're going to have to change something dramatically to have success, and blah, 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 blah. And, we project you as being a utility guy, maybe making the big leagues as a utility guy. And I always remember that. And I took that with me for my whole career. And I ran into the guy a bunch of times. And he came up and talked to me. This was after I made it, and I was in the big leagues for a number of years. And, he came up and talked to me, and I told him, I said, hey, I got to thank you. And he's like, for what? For drafting you? I'm like, no. I got to thank you for telling me I wasn't going to be able to do something. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, you told me I wasn't going to be able to hit the way that I hit. And I really didn't change anything, through the course of time. I just got smarter, and I got stronger, and I got quicker, but I'm still hitting the exact same way. So I said, I want to thank you for saying that to me, because you drove me all these years.
That's awesome.
to do well. And, so that was one thing. And then another thing was I actually, I want to say probably in 2000, maybe, I can't remember the year exactly, but I had a coach who I actually played with when I came up as a rookie, and he took a job as a first base coach. And, one night after a game in San Francisco at home, he was like, hey, what are you doing after the game? I'm like, nothing. I'm just walking home. I lived across the street. He goes, meet me at the such and such bar right across the street. We need to talk. And I'm like, all right. So we went over there, and he was like, listen, man, he goes, I played for 12 years. I understand everything. He goes, you're just killing yourself, man. He goes, you're killing yourself. You're putting so much pressure and so much stress on yourself to perform that you're not performing. He goes, you need to let it go. You need to relax. And I really appreciated that, because it was somebody I respected who took care of me when I was a rookie, and he was a veteran player. And I really took it to heart, and it meant a lot to me that he took the time to sit me down.
That's amazing that he did that. So what was the essence that allowed you? It's one thing when someone says you just got to relax, you're hard on yourself. I mean, that can sometimes be a common statement, right? Yeah. But when you're the athlete and your livelihood and your life and everything you've identified with is dependent upon that, what was it in you? Was it just because you trusted him that you could relax because someone who'd done it for 12 years was telling you that? Or was it something else that hit you that allowed you to take just enough of that pressure edge off to be able to perform?
I think it was a combination of both. I think I saw how much pressure I was putting on myself because of how hard I worked for years to get to where I wanted to be. And then at times it wasn't going like I thought it would be going. And the flip side is he was a guy I respected. So to get that from him at the time I got it was, priceless. I really couldn't, really put any price tag on it. And I appreciated it. And from that point on, I tried to kind of just take a calmer approach to the game. And honestly, Howard, I don't think it was not a coincidence that the best year of my career was the year that I was expecting, when we were expecting my first child. And I felt like there was something else that was bigger and that I needed to worry about than whether I went 3 for 4 or whatever. I had something bigger that meant more. And I think that was a huge turning point in my life and my career, was the fact that I knew I had a child on the way, and I knew it was going to be a boy. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I got a boy. I got another baseball player. And that year was like, I mean, if I could, one year in my career that nothing went wrong, whether it was performance, mentally, physically, whatever, it was that year. And I really think it was due to the fact that my mind and focus was elsewhere. It was on the health of my child and when my child was going to be born and when I was going to be, but would I be there? Would I be on the road? And I don't think that was a coincidence. I think I relaxed a lot more that year.
So that goes to the point that when you have just one thing that makes up your identity, or makes up 90% of your identity, it's too much. You can't, you can care to a point, but there's a point where it becomes counterproductive. And knowing that you were going to be a father and there was another piece that was going to expand and allow you to relax a little bit or be a part of who you are in the world, probably just took that edge off just enough. But I
totally did.
Yeah. But I totally understand what you're saying, that sometimes you need to hear it from somebody that's been there, done it, or has had experience with other people doing it. The analogy sometimes that I have to that particular idea of taking advice, swing coaches, a lot of swing coaches never played on tour, never played anywhere close. Maybe never even played the mini tours, but they're just really good at reading a swing and helping to point out to you what can change it to make it better.
Yep.
But the analogy is that, here's a guy who's, in a river and he's drowning and the river's, the current is really rapid and he's flailing and there's a guy on the side with a rope and he's trying to help him with it. And is the guy drowning going to look at him and say, hey, well, let me know if you've ever drowned before you throw me that rope, or take the rope. So, I've learned that it can come from anywhere, but it does help when somebody's either done it before with other people to a success or has been part of the sport, but information comes from everywhere.
I always say, nobody knows what it's like to be hit in the face with a fastball, but I do.
Great point.
I mean, you can't, you can't tell me
to just stand in there,
and try and get out of the way, but it's chasing you. But
exactly.
That's when it makes a big difference.
Exactly. And trust your own discernment on it. Mm-hmm. Trust what is going to help you out of it, and that you have enough confidence in what you do that you'll be able to take some advice and then some things you'll be able to leave, but some things can be really valuable. You mentioned to me once in a conversation that you had a swing coach that tried to work with your swing, and you had enough understanding of your own swing to not let it mess you up.
Yeah. I mean, I had a hitting coach one of my first couple of years. And I mean, in hindsight, the guy's one of the best athletes that ever played baseball. But it was old school back then. It was like, you got to hit this way or you're not going to be successful. And I tried it, man. I tried it. And finally I just got to a point where I'm like, I can't do this way. This isn't me. I can't be a cookie cutter, hitter that hits like you want me to. I can't do it. I have my own mechanics. I have my own thing. Fortunately for me, it worked out. I'm sure there's a lot of people that it doesn't work out for. I mean, now that I do broadcasting and I'm an analyst, I say things about guys' swings, but that's my job. Like, I'm not coaching them. My job is to tell people what I see and translate it to them on what I see. But I realize now as I'm older, every golfer swings differently. Every hitter swings differently. Every quarterback throws differently. Everything's different, and you have to work with what you have.
Right.
And make that successful.
Exactly. And there are times when somebody does bring something to you that changes everything.
Oh yeah.
And
totally.
And everything clicks. But I think you have to have enough confidence in what you're doing at that point, especially when you've made it to that level, to know, again, what works for you, what doesn't, that you'll be able to explore a little bit and try it. One of the things that surprised me most when working in Major League Baseball was when I went in, I thought it was going to be most of the young guys that were going to be open to this new stuff on the mental side and mindfulness. And what shocked me was that the veterans, the guys that had done really well in their career were just as open, and especially some big time players. And I realized it hit me that the reason was because what got them there was expanding on the possibilities for themselves, always being open to growing and not shutting that off. Therefore, they continued to be open as their career aged, and they were looking for new ways to get performance. They weren't shut off to any area that could help them. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could look at it this way too. Like, I played for 15 years, and when you hear the same stuff over and over and over again, and you get to a level, sometimes you want to hear something different. Like, how can I get to the next level?
Exactly.
And I think that's the difference, where you're saying like veterans were like really into trying to hear what you had to offer to try and get to that next level.
Yeah.
Some of the young guys are so scared and so bright lights, just like, deer in the headlight, that they're just trying to perform without thinking, which a lot can do because they're younger and their abilities are different and their reflexes are different. But I have, a couple examples where, you talk about the power of the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had one spring training, and I can't remember what year it was. It was early 2000s, maybe 2000. I can't remember, but I knew I had the job. I knew I had the shortstop job. I knew I was a starter. So I said, one of my big things, like scouts would say, oh, he's a first pitch fastball hitter. So like, let's not give him the first pitch fastball for a strike. So I knew that going in. I knew the report on me. So in spring training, I said, you know what? I'm going to try something. Every at bat I get up, I'm going to take a strike. Whether it's the first pitch or whether I'm 2-0 or whatever, I'm going to take a strike every at bat. And I went, I don't know, probably 60 to 75 at bats in that spring. And you know what? I didn't strike out one time. I was the only player in baseball who didn't strike out in spring training.
Wow. Now that's a lot of faith.
And I was like, okay, well, maybe I learned something. And the reason I was okay to do that is because I knew I had my job secure. So I can take that time and work on something and do that.
Right.
And it really taught me a lot about hitting. So there were times in my career where I would get up and I knew I was facing a certain pitcher. I'm like, I know he's not going to throw me first pitch fastball, so let me just take a strike. So that was one example. Another example is when I went to Cincinnati as an older player, when I've been in the league for 9 or 10 years already. I started watching a lot of film. I started looking at a lot of stats, because this is when like the stat age started really coming in, and there were numbers on everybody. So I did a lot of research, and I realized that most of the time when guys are hitting with runners in scoring position, whether it's no outs, 1 out, or 2 outs, the pitcher, like 80% of the time, would start the hitter with a breaking ball or an off-speed pitch. So I just one year in the middle of, like in the season, I was like, you know what? I'm hitting in the middle of the order here. I'm hitting between Ken Griffey, who's a Hall of Famer, and Adam Dunn, who hit 40 plus home runs a year. And I'm the guy in the middle who's like the put the bat on the ball guy to drive in runs. I just decided I'm going to sit on a first pitch breaking ball every time I get up with runners in scoring position. And I think I hit like 385 with runners in scoring position that year, and I drove in a bunch of runs. But those two examples to me were key in believing what I was doing in my mind and sticking to it.
And trying.
It wasn't two instances where like I like, okay, I got 3 fastballs for strikes in a row, 3 at bats in a row, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to swing. I stuck with it. And mentally, I knew it was the right thing to do. And I learned a lot from those two examples in my career, even though they were so many years apart. They were about 10 years apart.
But you were willing to try something new. That was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for you to sit there and take a first pitch throughout your, the whole swing and trust that process.
Totally.
And did you say the only hitter that did not strike out
in spring training? Like the only guy who had more than 10 at bats who didn't strike out in spring training.
Yeah. And that has to do with faith, and the faith to say, okay, do this. Or realizing and being on top of the idea of what the pattern was from pitchers with certain circumstances, with certain runners in scoring position, and what the likelihood of what you were going to get, and just sitting on that, waiting for it and being prepared for it to execute without changing your mind.
And that was it. It was just myself buying into my mental thought, my process of what I want to do. And it was funny because the strikeout thing, it didn't even hit me. Like, I didn't even know. I had no clue until like we were at the end of spring training, and Tony Gwynn actually said something to me. He said, hey, Rich, you're the only guy who hasn't struck out this spring training. Like, and I'm like, what? I'm like, why is Tony Gwynn talking to me about striking out? The guy never strikes out. But it showed how strong like your mind could be when it comes like when you're really like focused on performing and doing something.
Exactly. But again, I'll add to that strength had to be tested because you had to have the faith to do something that was not natural, that you weren't, that wasn't in your comfort zone. It was out of your comfort zone to do it, but yet your intuition told you that it was the right thing to do. So you committed to it without knowing what the outcome was going to be and just kept doing it because you knew it would work. And that to me is the power of that, which is really a really cool example of using your mind in a new way, trusting it and staying with it. And if it wasn't working, you would change it, but it was. And so you stayed with that faith and kept going with it.
And I gave it enough time to work too. It wasn't like, listen, I see guys try something for like 2 days and then they're like, oh, I'm done. So I gave it time. I gave it time, which is scary for athletes because you're always based on your performance and you don't want to fail.
So that has never been more important than to hear this, what you just said, than in this short-term, quick fix, instant gratification society. If there's one thing that's a key nugget right here, is that you have to stay with something long enough until it works and to trust that. Because so many people want quick results, they give up so early on something. They're not willing to stay with it. And that's where I see life being this perfect vetting process for those that have a faith and a belief that has to be tested. So it's really important in today. And again, this could be in business, or this could be in sport. Yeah, it could be in any. That's exactly right. It could be in anything.
Yeah.
But a very, very key thing. So I appreciate you sharing that. What would you say is one of your most challenging moments as a professional?
Oh, man. I would say probably after my season in 2004. After I had spent 8 years with the Giants through 2003, and I had a really nice run there, I signed to play as a free agent with the Mariners in Seattle. And, great team on paper, just dominated spring training. And by no means did I ever want to leave San Francisco. It was just one of those business, front office, money, contract thing. It happens in every sport. So I go to Seattle and we play great in spring training. We start the regular season and basically we end up like starting like 2-10. Like we ran into like two really good pitching staffs like right away. And then I think like week 3, I got hit by a pitch in the wrist and went to the doctor, MRI, all this stuff. You're fine. And I kept playing through the pain. I was in pain for a couple of weeks and I find like my numbers just like sank. And I went back to the doctor and they were like, "Yeah, did you fall down or something?" I'm like, "No, I got hit by a pitch playing baseball." And they're like, "You have a broken bone in your wrist." And I'm like, "Oh, great. Here we go." I'm like, "Can I hurt it more? What's going on? Can I hurt it worse?" And they're like, "No, just if you don't get hit there again, you're fine." So I kept playing through it, and which probably at the time was a mistake. But I had a terrible, and then right when I started getting hot with Seattle, they traded me to San Diego. And then I went to San Diego and I was kind of like a utility backup guy after starting for the last 6 years. So I think that year it was kind of a lost year for me.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I wasn't happy with the places I was at, but I just wasn't performing to the level that I was used to performing. And I remember in the off season, I actually thought about like kind of retiring, like stepping away.
Was there a fear in that? Or, I mean, or were you ready by then? That's 9 years in since your first major league game.
I think the fear was more that I wouldn't be able to do again what I did. Like I wouldn't be able to perform the way that I performed before. I think that was the biggest thing for me that I was worried about.
And how did you get yourself out of that? What was it that allowed you to get through the injury and work yourself back?
I just kind of set my mind in the off season. I started working out with a new trainer, and I said, you know what? If I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out on my terms. And I signed a minor league contract after being in the big leagues for 9 years with the Cincinnati Reds. And I think that was another motivating factor. I was like, I know I'm a big league player. I should not be signing a minor league contract at this point in time. At my age, I think I was 32, 33 years old. So I still felt like I had some game left in me. But I did it because, and the reason I signed with them was because I knew I was going to have a chance to be an everyday player. I knew I could win a spot on that team and play shortstop. And I went to camp, and then the weird thing was, I didn't even think about it at the time, was that was a year before that Barry Larkin retired. Barry Larkin's a Hall of Famer. He was there his whole career. He's an icon in that city.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even realize, like, I signed there to go replace him. And that was tough. And you know what? In the big scheme of things, I learned a lot, and it worked out. It worked out for me in the long run because I did play every day for a little bit. I got hurt. Somebody took my spot when I got hurt. Then I came back and I kind of reinvented myself as a utility guy that I could play all the infield positions, which I took a lot of pride in.
Mm-hmm.
But I accepted it, and I did as much work as I could at every position to be the best I could at every position.
So there's a couple important things that you said there. First, you had the belief that when you went there and signed the minor league contract, you had enough belief in yourself that you would get yourself back up.
Yeah.
And that you could earn a spot again. So you had to go backwards in a sense, backwards down to go back up again.
Yep.
But you never wavered in your belief that you would get there, or else you wouldn't have even probably done that.
Yep. Yeah, I probably would have just stayed home if I didn't think I had that in me.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was you took pride in the evolution of change, in the fact that it wasn't going to be the same. And so you adopted this idea that, hey, it might not be exactly, I might not be an everyday starter at shortstop. I'm going to be wherever they put me. I'm going to find a way to be valuable in that area. And I think that is key to adaptation, involvement, and survival.
Yeah. Well, two things on that, what you just said. One is that, I think in any role you have as an athlete or in life or whatever your job is, you do a better job at it if you accept that that's what you are. I accepted it. And I said, if I'm going to do this, why not be the best guy at doing this? Like, why can't I be the best guy that does this? And that's the mentality I took. On the other side of that is the fact that if you look around baseball now and the guys that play for all these teams and the way the teams are built, I was doing that in 2005 and 2006. I was playing first base, second base, third base, shortstop. Now teams are looking for guys. They're building their teams around guys that are multifaceted where they could play all these different positions. You look at the Dodgers have guys that do that. You look at the Giants are going to have guys that do that. You look at all these teams now, and they have guys that like, oh, if we have a righty pitching, we could put this guy at second base. But if a lefty's pitching, we'll play him in left field because that guy can't hit lefties. So like, I feel like now looking back, like I'm not saying I created that trend, but like, I feel like if I played today, yeah, I could fit into this game because I could play 4 positions at above average defensively because I really worked at it. And you weren't going to lose much offensively with me because I was a pretty above average offensive infielder.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it now and I'm like, oh, these guys are, every team has like 2 or 3 of these guys. And I was like the guy back then where, it's like, okay, you're not starting today, but be ready to go to third base in the 6th inning because our third baseman isn't a great defender. And then if we need to double switch, you may move over to first base later in the 9th inning. And I understood that and I accepted it.
Right. And that's key.
Which made it easier.
Yeah. You were ready for that.
Yeah.
And that kind of humility, I will call it, to be able to do that, I think is what gets rewarded, because then you find your way back to what you love to do and what you want to do. You're not fighting what the truth is of the moment. You're accepting that this is what it is, and you're always open to something greater happening, but you're going to take pride in whatever it is that you're doing with a sense of humbleness and gratitude that you're there with the hope that, this continues to expand for a while. And it did.
Yeah. And what I also understood too was, and I learned this early in my career, was I had a coach that hammered into my head. Baseball's a game. It's the long season. It's a game of statistics. He goes, and offensively, if you could get one of something every day, you're going to play this game for a long time. He goes, if that's a hit, if that's a walk, if that's a run scored, if it's a sacrifice hit, if it's a stolen base, if it's an RBI, if it's a home run, he goes, you get one of something every day, you're going to hang in there for a long time. And so when I got to that point in my career where I was not playing every day, but I was playing, by saying that, I mean, I was still playing like 50, 60% of the time, whether it was pinch hitting or starting every other day or whatever. I always had that mentality. I was like, if I can do one something today, get one something to help this team win, that's what I'm going to do. And it always ended up, with that mentality, it always ended up being 2 of something, because it wasn't like you were pressing. You were like, I just got to do one thing, and then everything after that's great.
So again, another nugget as it relates to being a great baseball player or being a great athlete or being great in business. It's the little things that add up to something great, and doing them consistently and having a great, optimistic, hopeful attitude about it, no matter what. And I think that's really the epitome of what you're saying, which is really cool.
Yeah. You know what, Howard? I look back. I mean, we've known each other for a long time now. I look back, and would there be things that I would do differently in my career? Of course there would. Of course there would be. I mean,
can't go back though.
No, you can't go back. But I mean, hindsight's 20/20, right? But you know what? I could look back and I tell my boys the same thing. And you know this. If you could look in the mirror after a game or a tournament and say that you did all you could do, you were prepared and you did all you could do, and it just wasn't in the cards that day, guess what? There's always tomorrow. There's always tomorrow to come back to.
And just for informational purposes, Rich has 2 younger sons. One's going to be a sophomore. Is that right? Or just finished his sophomore season at
he'll be a sophomore
at University of Arizona. He's on the golf team there. And the other one's going to be a senior in high school. And they are both, for their age, world-class golfers. There obviously is some connection between jacking home runs and a golf ball 340 yards, because both of these kids hit it a mile and are super, super talented. So, and I've had the pleasure of working with both of them. They're awesome kids with big, bright futures ahead of them. So just as a side note for everyone.
I wanted to let you know that I offer private sessions for those who are truly serious about positively changing their life and breaking through to experience new positive results. Sessions are on FaceTime, Zoom, or Skype, and are designed to empower you with a new awareness and strength of mind. This is open to athletes at all levels, business people, and individuals looking to get through and overcome everyday issues. For more, go to howardfalco.com or totalmindsports.com to connect by email, or call 480-585-9750. Answers and positive change for your life are closer than you think. Now, back to the podcast.
Cool. So you're around a lot of great players in your career.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pick up things from them that they did mentally that helped you?
I don't know. I think it's weird because I think a lot of the great players, like when I say great players, I'm talking about Hall of Fame caliber players. I think they just have so much ability and a great mental approach that it's really hard to, and not a lot of them share a lot. They kind of keep to themselves and, keep their secrets to themselves. But I mean, there were times where, I was, either struggling or dealing with something offensively where I wasn't hitting the ball I wanted to, where, and honestly, the first time it happened, it's actually kind of a funny story. We were in Milwaukee, and it was the old stadium in Milwaukee, which was like literally it's where they filmed Major League, that stadium. And I mean, it was a dump. But I remember one day, it was a day game on a Sunday or something. I wasn't playing, and I was sitting. This is back in the day, Howard, where our hitting videos were on VHS tapes, and we'd stick it in the machine and watch our at bats and whatever. And I remember watching it one morning. I wasn't playing on a Sunday, and Barry Bonds walked by, and he's like, "What are you doing?" Like just like that. What are you doing? And I'm like, he never talked to me at that point in time, but I'm like, I'm watching my video to see what I'm doing wrong. I'm kind of trying to fix my swing. He goes, "You don't know what you're doing wrong?" I'm like, "No, that's why I'm sitting here." He goes, get your bat, meet me in a batting cage in like 10 minutes.
This is Barry Bonds who said this.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is probably like in 1999. Maybe 99. So I'm like, all right. So I grab my bat and go down to the cage, and the whole team's down there, like just getting ready for the game, and hitting coach is in one cage and there's another cage next to it. So he just takes me in the other cage, and he's like, he goes, just grab your bat, like right in the middle, like right, like where the pine tar is. And he goes, I'm going to throw you these balls, and you just need to take it like a tennis racket. Wherever I throw it, just take the barrel of the bat to the ball. And just, I don't care where you hit it, just take it to it. And he just started like flinging balls at me, like one after another, like behind like the screen. I mean, not like taking time, like just like throw. And I'm like, he's like, okay, now let me flip you some when you hit. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, do you know why we did that? And I'm like, no. He goes, one, I had to just get your mind off of like what you were thinking about. But two, he goes, what's the main thing in hitting? He goes, taking the barrel to the ball. He goes, right now, you're trying to take the whole bat to the ball, and your swing is long and big and whatever. He goes, you just need to take this little portion right here. He goes, the barrel of the bat, this is what stuck in my mind for the barrel of the bat is like the web of your glove. He goes, if you play shortstop, do you want to catch the ball in your palm, or do you want to catch it in the web? I'm like, I want to catch it in the web. He goes, so then when you're hitting, why wouldn't you want to catch the ball in the barrel of your bat? Why, like, there's no reason to catch it on the label or on the end. He goes, So basically your barrel of your bat is the pocket of your glove. And that's what you need to do to hit and take the, and I was like, it was the most insightful 20 minutes of my career at that point, where I'm like, this guy who's at the point in time was a Hall of Famer already. I'm like, this guy actually, one, saw me struggling, but two, thought enough of me as a teammate and a professional to take me to do that. And mentally, I don't think he really knew what that meant to me. Because in my mind, I'm like, holy cow, Barry Bonds actually cares what I do. And he took me down there to work with me. And that gave me the confidence to just move forward.
Yeah. So he simplified. First, he got you out of your thinking mind, got you to be reactionary by throwing balls at you at light speed so you could just react and not think. And then he showed you something very simple that brought it back to simplicity that allowed you just to act. It's the same thing in golf. Sometimes something so simple and all of a sudden you're hitting it square and perfect.
Yeah. I think a lot of times in sports and in life, we think about this when we should be thinking about that.
Right. We think about too much when we just need to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And let it go from there. Yeah. Interesting. So talk about Bonds. You talked about Griffey. Was there some sort of extra aura that they carried about themselves, a way that they handled themselves, that they that not only on the field but off the field?
I'll say this: Barry knew he was the best, and there was no question he was the best. And the way he carried himself, he was the best. He wasn't intimidated by anybody. He wasn't fearful of anybody. He could accept failure.
Three keys.
He was
right
just
there.
on a different level. He was just on a different level where the ability matched up with the mentality. Just, I've never seen anything like it.
But he saw who he was on the inside, and everything he did supported that to the moment that it mattered execution-wise, and then he took it into that moment.
Yeah, and the perfect example with him is the fact that early in his career, when he was at Pittsburgh for years, I mean, he was the best player in baseball back then, but he never performed in the postseason. And then you fast forward, like, we get to the postseason in 97 and he really doesn't do anything. And then in 98, we had a playoff game. He didn't do anything. And in 2000, he really didn't do anything. And then when he took that turn of like his mentality of like, I am not going to chase any pitches outside the strike zone. If they walk me 200 times, I'm going to walk. And we got to that postseason in 2002 after he hit 73 home runs the year before. And basically just, I mean, honestly, half his at-bats, he just stood there because, like, he was so good. His eye was so good, his knowledge of strike zone. But he got to that postseason and literally had minimal chances to be successful and be pitched to. And he had a monster postseason. And I think that was just the knowledge and the experience and the mentality changing over his career, not to press and try and be the best player. He already was the best player.
So that's another interesting point, is that here he was already a great player, but he had to go to the next level mentally, strategically, and adjust to the way pitchers were thrown to him, knowing they weren't going to throw him anything in the strike zone, and being patient and sitting back and not biting and waiting and adjusting his mind to it so that he could execute the way he wanted to. So he changed based on the strategy that was being implemented towards him rather than trying to force something that wasn't going to work.
And that's what the most amazing thing to me was in 2001 when he hit all those home runs and broke the single season record. I hit right in front of him, and that was my career year. And part of my career year was hitting in front of him because I did get better pitches to hit. Not to say he was the whole reason. I mean, I had to perform. Execute. But the second half of that season, I don't know mentally, and I'd be curious to talk to him about it, but mentally, to move forward the way he did with the amount of pitches he was getting to hit per game, like he was getting nothing to hit. They were walking him every time. And on top of chasing the home run record, getting death threats, getting hate mail, getting all this stuff, I don't know how mentally like he kept it together, but he did. And to get one pitch every 4 days to hit, and you hit it out of the park, I mean, it was the most amazing 3 months of baseball that I ever witnessed. And I was fortunate enough to like be firsthand. I mean, I was on base for a lot of those.
Right.
And then you flip to Griffey's side.
Interesting.
And Griff was always like, Griff was a different personality. Griff was more personable. I think Ken, at the beginning of his career, like he knew he was the best and he performed like the best. And, you know, and I think as he got older, you know, like time catches up with all of us. And I think it, you know, towards the end, he was just working with what he had. He was still like, I don't know mentally how his approach was, but his pure talent at 37, 38 years old was still way better than like your kid who was 24, 25 years old. And he was doing it with pure talent and pure, just beautiful swing and whatever. But, you know, they were different personalities. You know, Kenny was more approachable and more fun loving, and, you know, and Barry was kind of keep to himself. But fortunately for me, I got along with both of them, and I still do. because I took the mentality, with Barry. Like, Barry was always nice to my family, my kids, and me. And I took the approach. I'm like, you know what? If this guy helps us win a championship and he's on the field at the time we need to be there or whatever, that's kind of all I care about. And, at the same time, then I go play with Ken, and Ken's like, hey, man, you want to go to dinner tonight? Let's go to dinner. Let's do, So it was two different mentalities, but two great ball players. And again, neither one would be where they were without probably their pedigree with their dads that played, but two, just their mentality, how they approached the game.
Exactly. They still had to work at it. They still had to have the belief. They still had to step in every night.
Yep.
And you talking about Ken Griffey towards the end of his career because he had such natural talent, but he also had probably the wisdom of all those years and how to use that wisdom to get himself in the right counts and to be more prepared.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Interesting insight. Was being a professional baseball player what you thought it was going to be, or was it different?
It ended up being more than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I got to, and more like just fulfilling. When I started, did I ever think I was going to play close to 15 years? Absolutely not. I was just hoping to make it to the big leagues. But then, once you get there and you get a taste of it and a taste of the life and the lifestyle, and, you get to travel, you get to go to great cities, you get to go to the nice restaurants, you make a really nice salary. You just want more of it. And I feel very fortunate that I lasted that long without any major injuries, to get through.
It's a great career. And going back, you said, 24th round. I was saying that from a positive perspective, like, you know what, like it just shows you it doesn't matter. It matters what you do with the opportunity you're given. I mean, the Tom Brady example, what number did he get drafted?
Like 6th round or something, but probably 200 and something or whatever.
200 and something, whatever. Yeah. And look what happened to him. So I was saying that from a positive, like you turned it into an unbelievable career, which is incredible. I don't think people realize the amount of intensity and hours upon hours upon hours of work that it takes to get yourself into that space. So,
well, I think now the game's changed so much where every little thing is so isolated. So I'd say the differences from the time I retired till now, 10 years, the players are taken care of so much better now than we were. They have sleep rooms and they have recovery rooms and they have different areas of how they track their sleep and how they feed them. And I remember my first game in the big leagues, I was like, all right, what's the post-game spread after this game of Candlestick? And we got the leftover hot dogs from the concession stand. I'm like, whoa, I had better food in AAA. But I think the game's changed so much, it's hard to judge. It's like, for me, it's the same comparison as like, can you judge a player in this era to the era of like the 60s, like the dead ball era? I don't think you can compare them because they're so different.
You think it's harder to make it today than it was then?
I think the athletes and the players are better in a whole, in a group.
Yeah, they're starting
like the
when they're
whole
2 and 3
1,000 players are better. They're training differently. They play year round now. They train all year round. Like back in the day, guys had to go work to pay for food for their families when they were, coming, even in the big leagues. So I think now it's different. But again, now too, it's every pitcher throws 97, 98, 99, 100 miles an hour. Back in my day, if you had 2 guys on a team that threw that hard, it was a lot. So is it harder? I don't know. I'd say it'd be harder for a guy like me to make it because I was such a low draft pick, where I feel like everything would have to go right. You don't see a lot of guys like that anymore. But the game has changed so much where it's catered to the health and conditioning and well-being of the athlete.
Yeah, they're more elite at a younger age and prepared than they ever were in the past.
They track these guys' sleep now.
Yeah.
Like they put sleep monitors on them and they call you in. They're like, you need to sleep better at night or you need to do this better at night. It's so centralized now that everything
it's
is
food, it's biomechanics,
Yep.
it's preparation, it's the mental side,
Yep.
and that introduction. So there's all these different aspects now that we're finding help become even better and better as more and more people are trying to get into a small box and play at that level. I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that young athletes sometimes take for granted. They see what it's like. They see all the fanfare. They see the spoils, but they don't understand the amount of work and focus and determination that it takes to get there.
Well, yeah, and even
sacrifice.
the sacrifice of also of time, family time, your travel. I mean, it's not. Listen, it's a great lifestyle. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But at the same time, like, you're on the road a lot. You're flying from midnight to 5 a.m. a lot of times going across country. You're getting into hotels at 6 in the morning. You're sleeping in till 1 o'clock because you got in at 6 in the morning. You're not eating 3 square meals a day. You're abusing your body basically in heat and different conditions or whatever. So it's not as glamorous as everybody would portray it to be. But again, I mean, if I could still put on the uniform today, I would do it. I would do it in a heartbeat. I love the game and I love playing. And I'll tell you what, the thing I miss most is just the being around the guys and the camaraderie. I mean, people ask me all the time, like, hey, do you think you could still hit one out of Oracle Park in batting practice? I'm like, I have no clue because I haven't swung a bat off a pitch in like 7 years. I really haven't. And they're like, well, why haven't you? And I'm like, what am I going to do with it? I'm like, okay, I hit a few balls and then I wake up the next day and I say, oh, my back's sore or something like that. So I'm like, there's really nothing for me to do it for except the love of it. And I haven't really missed it that much.
Do you remember a pinnacle moment in your career in something that happened that was great, hitting one out in an important game where you thought, this is what all the hard work is for? Or were you so focused that you didn't even allow yourself to think that? You just...
No, I mean, I had some in 01. I had a good playoff run. I mean, I'm sorry, 02. I had a good playoff run. I had really good numbers in the postseason. Hit 2 home runs in a league championship series game 2 against the Cardinals. But honestly, for me, I always kind of looked at myself because of the players I played with. Barry Bonds should be a Hall of Famer and Jeff Kent should be a Hall of Famer. They were our guys. Mm-hmm. And I just looked at it as like, I'm a piece of this puzzle and the puzzle can't be complete without me. So if I just do my job and what I'm capable of doing, we have a chance to win and complete the puzzle. So for me, it was always about that. And I guess like my highlight would be my last game I played in San Francisco. I mean, that's what the hard work was for. Mm-hmm. I played my last game and you walk off the field and 40,000 people are standing up cheering for you and you got tears in your eyes. That's
amazing, Rich.
That's what it was about. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that day for my whole life. And it wasn't about how many home runs I hit or how many hits I got or whatever. It was about, and I always said this, Howard, and I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you. People always ask me, they're like, did you ever want to be a Hall of Famer? Or do you ever want to go? And I'm like, I'm not a Hall of Fame player. I'm on the Giants Wall of Fame because I played there a long time and I had a good career.
Which is incredible.
But yeah, and I'm thankful for that. But in my mind, if I could turn around and just say like, you know what? I just wanted my teammates to say, hey, he was a good teammate and he played the game the right way. That's all that mattered to me. I really don't care about anything else than that.
That is absolutely awesome.
So
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just have a couple more questions for you. And I really appreciate you doing this and offering this great wisdom and insight for so many years. What is the best advice as a former professional player that you would either give a young baseball player who has dreams or a young athlete in general that wants to be at the highest level?
I would just say don't take yourself too seriously. I think I've seen it a lot in baseball, especially watching kids play and parents push kids to play. I think when you take yourself in the game a little too seriously, you underperform. So there's really a lot to be said for when people say, have fun playing. So I think that would be my main thing. I'd be like, don't take it so seriously, because you know what?
Counterproductive.
Yeah. And in any sport, I said this earlier, in any sport, every sport, find me a sport that is not based where the majority of the time is failure. It's failure. It's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be successful in baseball as a hitter 30% of the time, and you're great. And, if you're a quarterback in football, if you complete 60% of your passes, you're great. I mean, in golf, everything everything is built around numbers. So don't take it too seriously. Just have fun and understand that there's going to be failures. Even Tiger Woods fails a good amount of times.
Right. And Jack Nicklaus said he only hit like 2 or 3 perfect shots an entire round of golf.
Yeah.
It was about managing when he didn't hit it perfect,
mm-hmm.
and his response to it that allowed him to be great and rise above everyone else, where everybody else got vetted out, and faded away because they didn't handle those moments.
Yep.
Well, so last question for you. What does life look like for Rich Aurilia, 10 years retired from the game of baseball?
Life takes place more on a golf course than anywhere else now because of the boys. And it's funny, and this, you try and impart this knowledge on your own children. And that's the hard part. And I learned this coaching them in baseball years ago. I had another buddy of mine, another former player, Jermaine Dye. He was World Series MVP in 2005 with the White Sox. Our kids grew up together. They went to the same school, and they were all athletes, and they played baseball on the same team. And we had this deal where, like, Jermaine would be like, okay, you talk to my kids and I'll talk to your kids, because you're dad, and they don't want to listen to what mom and dad have to say, but they'll listen to other people. So I think right now life revolves around being a proud dad for what my kids have accomplished, both in school and on the golf course. I have the winery, Red Stitch, that keeps me busy.
Great wine, by the way.
Thanks.
Look that up.
And still, still broadcasting for the Giants, doing pre and post game shows where, it keeps me in the game just enough. I don't want to coach. I don't want to be around it 24/7 like I was for 15 years. I had my fill. And that's enough for me. Awesome. That's it. I enjoy being with the boys and my daughter Maya, and being home and just kind of laying low and grabbing the sticks every few days and going out with the boys and watching them destroy me. So
that's it. It's awesome.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, there's nothing better than watching your kids become great at something and beat you at it eventually. Well, Rich Aurilia, thank you very much for sharing your insight and wisdom on the podcast. Congratulations on an amazing career and being one of the great guys of the game, of sport and life. I really appreciate it, and really appreciate having you on. Yeah,
thanks for the opportunity, and keep up all the good work, Howard.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Rich. All right. Thanks, everybody.
You can hit the subscribe button to be automatically notified of new episodes when they come out. And please share the podcast with others you think would enjoy it. More information about my books on personal empowerment or inquiries about private sessions or group coaching can be found at my websites, howardfalco.com or totalmindsports.com. You're also welcome to connect with me on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Thanks again for listening, and remember that the one true guru of your life is always you. Until we see what you bring to yourself next time, be well.